Shane Kilkelly.
I'm Kyle Thompson.
And you're listening to General Intellect Unit. And this time we're going to read an article from August of this year titled Post Open Source by Melody Horn. And we're kind of going to use it as a jumping off point to just kind of talk around this, I guess, putting the gravestone on free and open source software once and for all. Because it's all over, folks. Time to pack up our shit and go home. We're rolling out of Saigon. It's all over.
I believe that Melody refers in this article as open source now being a lich. And I think that's about right. It's like it's undeath. It's dead, but it still moves. Yep. Because, obviously open source development is going to keep going, and people are going to be using it because we use it in like a billion things everywhere. But as an ideology, I believe it is indeed dead.
As like a community driven thing. Up near the top of the article, there's a quote from Kat Marchand that, in my opinion, open source as a community endeavor is falling apart right before our eyes and being replaced by open source as big corp entrenchment strategy. Pretty much. The community angle of it is pretty much gone.
Yes.
And right at the top of the article as well, the author says that she's writing this in the wake of the Mozilla layoffs, right, in August of this year, where the gist. So maybe for the listeners who aren't completely up on this sort of stuff, Mozilla is the non-profit that backs the Firefox browser, the development and stuff, and the marketing of that. The thing is, they get pretty much 90% of their revenue comes from a deal with Google to be the default search engine in a lot of territories, which kind of means that the donations and stuff that they get and whatever minor services they sell really don't pay for very much. It's all on Google's purse strings, which Google knows. They know that they have the power in this relationship. So this year, there was a 10-year deal for that search engine placement thing, and then that expires or was due to expire later this year. Google weren't renewing it. And then Mozilla did a big round of layoffs to lay off a lot of the engineering staff, a lot of the community sort of things. So Mozilla had also maintained Mozilla Developer Network, which is basically the documentation for the web, for JavaScript and HTML and CSS and all that kind of thing. That team is gone. The Servo team, who were building out new web technologies, they're all gone. A whole bunch of fucking stuff. Just a massacre, basically. And then pretty soon after the announcement of these layoffs, Google, I think, said they were we are going to renew the deal after all, but probably on very different terms. And the tone has been set, Google knows they can do this. They can just dangle, or they can cease to dangle the carrot for a little while to get their way. And it's I don't know, Mozilla, Firefox and so on, still ticking along now, but it's hard to miss the feeling in the air that it's kind of over, basically, as a major concern.
Specifically, Servo was laying the groundwork for the next period of Firefox, correct?
Yeah, it was going to be the technical foundations for a massively revamped attempt at a browser stack, but that's been hamstrung.
And that was built on top of Rust, right?
Yeah. So Rust was a Mozilla project originally, basically.
Yes.
They've incubated it for a long time. Thankfully, they've now kind of confirmed that they're spinning it out into its own foundation and so on. But just a wild couple of days with that announcement, and people really speculating geez, is this the end of Rust as a major thing as well? And thankfully not. But it gives you some indication of the scale of this kind of problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still using Firefox on my PC because the browser space is such a desert, of just extremely low diversity and not necessarily quality, but
Well,
it's kind of like you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black, right? You can have it in any browser you want as long as it's Chrome.
Yeah, because like Chrome is the only. Well, I mean, yeah. So you have the WebKit engine, which is then the basis for Blink, which is the thing that's in Chrome now. But it's basically we just call it WebKit, and that's it. Like there's Gecko, the stuff that's run by Firefox, and then there's WebKit or Blink, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Even Microsoft has replaced Internet Explorer with the new version of Edge is going to drop their own rendering engine. The Trinity engine is gone and simply replaced by Chrome. Right, basically, like it's Chrome but with a different paint job. Which means that like web standards and that kind of like the open ecosystem of the web through the 90s and the 2000s and so on is it's over. That's gone because there's only really one implementation that's viable anymore, and there's another implementation which is steadily losing ground. But also losing ground through a deliberate strategy on the part of the first party, right? To deliberately undermine that other thing. So it's a monoculture aside from Firefox, and Firefox is kind of slipping towards its grave, which is very unfortunate.
It's important that Servo has been killed because without Servo, we cannot expect that Mozilla standard will continue to exist into the future. It's certainly easy to predict that they will also go to a WebKit Chrome-based solution.
They'll have to.
just like Microsoft did, because they have no future. They've killed their future. This is like their System 4 is just like it has self-annihilated.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no possibility really for the long-term development. They're gonna have to rebase onto some sort of like basically a rebranded Chrome, right? Like and like the reason for like again, I have to be kind of aware that like a lot of listeners won't necessarily be up on web fucking psycho stuff like we are, but like implementing a web browser is now basically impossible unless you have like nation state level funding or you're Google. Because the standards are so huge and there's so many decades of crap to keep on top of. Browsers have this unfortunate kind of constraint where they have to keep basically everything working, including all the weird bugs and fuck-ups from 1997. They have to still render. So it's just an impossible task. And it means that if you are I guess that this is very similar to like the Ashby's law of requisite variety thing, where the agent that has the largest available pool of resources and the largest repertoire to draw from will tend to win out. And I've seen it said by kind of former Mozilla people that this kind of thing was going on where Google were kind of deliberately calling the pace of the engagement and deliberately kind of dictating what would happen so as to like advantage themselves and disadvantage others. So like it means that like if Google can simultaneously push for new standards to be introduced, and they can also have a team on staff that can like implement them very quickly, and they know that everyone else can't implement them as quickly, it's very easy to see which way the slope goes there. It goes towards Google's favor.
It's exactly what we're going to see when we do eventually cover Boyd, right? Like this is like Boydian military doctrine. yeah.
This is the OODA loop. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and like maybe a tiny summary of that is that like if you're, because it's this military engagement sort of thing where you need to be acting fast enough that you can overwhelm the opponent, but also disrupt their ability to act. So you speed yourself up and slow them down simultaneously if you can. It's a tried and tested strategy, and it seems to actually work. But that's also it's so characteristic of what's possible in like capitalist firms, right? Where this concentration of power and the concentration of capital accumulation tends to run away with itself. Like a very slight advantage initially tends to snowball into a larger and larger advantage.
Oh, definitely. And again, need to emphasize that Mozilla has been effectively a subsidiary of Google all this time.
They've been on the payroll, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the person who pays the bills calls the shots, right? And it's so just to kind of get into the broader significance of this, like, yes, you know, as a sort of end user, it is annoying that we're going to be forced into a monoculture, and you know, the things I've relied on Firefox for years, I feel much less confident in. That's all rough, but I think the thing that actually just kind of hits you in the gut more is that Mozilla has represented the kind of like kinder, friendlier version of Silicon Valley capitalism up until this point, in the sense that, like, you know, they talk a lot about ethical standards. They are a free software company, right? And they, despite continually losing market share to Google and only really being able to survive thanks to Google funding and the legacy code that they possess because of coming out of Netscape, they were still, you know, a relevant player, and they were doing things like Rust, right? Projects like Rust that have gone on to form like quite a positive community by all accounts. And when you just see, like, you know, the capitalist boot coming down and just crushing that space of idealism, with like almost like, you know, just like flicking a flea or something off of you, like just like, oh yeah, I'm done with you now. It is crushing, because it means like the dream is really dead now, folks. Like, this is not in any way a viable route forward for positive technical development. Technical development outside of capitalist standards of production.
It's not coming back. The genie isn't going back in the bottle here. I until this happens, like, I think we've talked before on the show about like the various ways in which like the free software, or like the free software position had been steadily losing ground, and so on. But like, it didn't really sink in for me entirely until this event that, like, Mozilla was kind of the last of any of that kind of like positive freedom software sort of stuff, you know. And with that one kind of gone, I just kind of like think to myself, like, there's nothing else. Like, there's nobody else waving that banner anymore. And I kind of like suddenly think to myself, I'm not sure I want to stay in tech, like in this. And like, but how weird is it that it was hanging on by that tiny thread?
It had a really outsized ideological effect just by existing. Like something like Red Hat and Fedora. It's like, well, Fedora is not a thing that your average user would ever interact with in a million years.
Nor should they. And I run Fedora, and they shouldn't do that.
It's like this is a very niche thing for technicians and engineers. You know, it's not software for the people in any way, right? Like, so yeah, it really did have an outsized ideological influence, and like, it was really quite crushing. And it's really shocking to me as well that I managed to bracket the obvious in my mind for such a long time that, like, oh yeah, well, I mean, this is just a PR front being run by Google. Like, it's not even hard to put together. Like, the money is coming directly from Google and everyone knows it. And everyone's just like, oh yeah, but they're keeping it around because like it's good to have a diverse ecosystem and blah, blah, blah. But Occam's razor would kind of dictate a different conclusion here, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe it was useful, but up to a point, right? That like that utility is always going to be marginal and sort of comparative, right? Like because there's even greater utility to being dispensed with all of that shit and just like ruling with an iron fist if you can get away with it. And when you're not doing that, it says that you can't get away with it yet. But when you can start getting away with it, then it's like, yeah, maybe start dropping the pretenses. So like, yeah, Mozilla has been like the Terminator with its face on, and Google is the Terminator with its face off. And yeah, I think we're seeing the slippage, certainly. Google are more brazen now about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think they're not worried about antitrust in this because they would have done something different if they were. Like it would have been, if they were still really concerned about antitrust here, they would have just kept Firefox going because it's like literally no threat to them whatsoever to have it exist.
Well, I mean, maybe it's also kind of important that, as far as I understand, they did eventually come through on sort of at least saying they would renew the deal. Which means that Mozilla will hang on, but it'll be even more hamstrung than ever before. So I think they could still use it as a defense against antitrust, you know what I mean? Which is, it's like...
That's true. That's true.
It's that in itself would be an excellent, like, four-dimensional chess sort of move, right? Of, like, effectively neuter the opposition, but domesticate them, like, so that they're, like... Well, more than they were already domesticated, right? But like where they definitely won't pose a threat going forward. But
yeah, they're absolutely supine to the point that because they have no future, right? So there's no way that they could even conceivably pose a threat to Google. It's like in state socialist countries where they keep the legacy capitalist parties around. There's like 5 or 6 other political parties that participate in elections, but it's like literally impossible for them to ever win.
Yep, just keep them around for show.
Yeah, or like this is less of a direct analogy, but something like the Green Party in the U.S., right? Like which is not a perfect analogy because in the state socialist case, it's like no, like. There's like these parties are being kept around at the Communist Party's beck and call, right? Like,
is there also like a kind of analogy, perhaps? I don't know. Maybe it's stretching it a bit, but like the kind of what happened with kind of Euro communism and stuff, where they sort of became these like captured opposition sort of social democrat parties, or like they put up a show opposition to the system, but are really fully integrated into it. And then when, like, say, May 68 comes around, they're like, oh, no, we're not interested in, letting Algeria go. No, fuck that. We're keeping it, They're very much the lapdogs of the system, but like as a kind of internal opposition, like a fake red team or something.
Yeah. Like that was specifically like prior to Euro communism, which is like the final capitulation.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, yes, those parties were funded by Moscow, but if you think about the sort of world system as a whole, Moscow's primary interest was to cause just enough bother to be geopolitically effective while not actually rocking the boat.
Right. But I think also that those parties, maybe the unifying thread here is that like they soak up opposition into a fairly ineffective form where, if you're somebody who cares about software freedom and that sort of stuff, you can kind of still be on the payroll of Google effectively, but make a show of the opposition. And like maybe I should clarify as well, like I don't blame many of the individual people involved in this sort of stuff, and like I wish this was otherwise. I strongly wish this wasn't happening, but like a fair assessment maybe is warranted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I don't bear ill will towards the people who have been developing this software I've been using for years and years and years and years and paid nothing for. No, I mean, of course, they've done good work. But
it seems to have been brutally mismanaged, more so than misdeveloped. Because there's a split between the Mozilla. Maybe this is all stuff that's like relevant for future organizing stuff, right? Where Mozilla, there's the Mozilla organization, and then there's like the Mozilla Corporation, which is like a more serious entity that's dedicated to like the development of Firefox. But if you go to the Mozilla website and you make a donation, that goes to the non-profit, not to the development. And a lot of people have said this, like, it seems to be really badly mismanaged and seems to kind of be a jobs program for NGO dickheads, really. And that the money doesn't actually go to the development at all. So, going around doing a lot of raising awareness, yada yada, that kind of usual NGO stuff, but for web tech or whatever. It's like, turns out to have very little utility of any kind,
It's all PR, right?
Yeah. Which is it's laundering the fucking reputation of Silicon Valley. Whereas, like, the engineers that are actually working on Firefox, like, I would believe that they care about, like, actually concretely making this stuff good. But, if you're interested in picking up a 6-figure fucking check to go to seminars and stuff and to, like, put out cool blog posts, it's the NGO part of Mozilla that you're going to go to.
Right, right.
Very disappointing.
So that's kind of the situation with Firefox and with Mozilla. It's a very dismal picture, and honestly, like, I still feel like I'm in the bargaining stage of grief. Like, I can't quite delete it off of my devices. I just, like, I can't bring myself to do it. No. But we need to talk more broadly about, like, what the implications are for quote unquote free and open source software.
Which this article gets more into, right? Like, because the assessment is basically that, like, we use the term FOSS, FOSS, for like free and open source software, but the whole thing's a fucking joke basically by this point, because the two sides of it, free software and open source software, are quite different. Initially, you had like the free software movement, which emphasized like the freedom to run any program for any purpose, the freedom to study how the program works and make your own changes, the freedom to redistribute those changes, and so on. Which is very like freedom for programmers, right? But it was fairly concrete, but also sort of who gives a shit, right? Like as they put it in the article, it's explicitly political, but the politics suck. Which I think is there's a lot of really scathing burns in this article. It's wonderful.
It says it's concise, it's understandable, and it's kind of useless. Like, as you said, it is a political program for software engineers.
Mm-hmm. The worst kind of people.
The only freedom that really affects the end user is the run the program for any purpose and redistribute and make copies. Like, those two kind of have some value for the end user, but it's much more significant to the end user that the software quality is good and that it is free as in beer, right?
And it's usually not good. It's almost always free, but it's rarely actually any good. Like, nobody uses GIMP by choice. If they could use Photoshop, they would, more or less.
I mean, to be fair, recording this on Audacity right now as we speak, and we've recorded every GIU episode in our history on Audacity.
We have.
So the quality, it's usually like good in very narrow and specific ways, is I guess how I would describe free software. Like, it's usually quite good in some ways, and then very limited in others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I've been using Audacity for, Jesus, it must be nearly 20 years now. And it's been consistently awful, but consistently available for all those 20 years. And I'm like, holy shit, this is great. But like, I think it's maybe telling that our usage of Audacity by now is like launch the program and then hit the red button. That's the only feature we ever use. But like, yeah, it's kind of hard to like, I don't know. Yeah, I definitely don't want to be tough on like the people involved in this sort of stuff. But like, I think the point that the article is trying to get to is that like pitching this stuff as like, oh, it's a sort of ethical freedom that software engineers can live with, but is somewhat indifferent to the quality or like the sort of way that it impacts end users is not the best pitch in the world.
The benefits to the end user are kind of like knock-on effects of what is really a political program for coders, for software engineers. Absolutely.
They get into a pretty interesting section on the way this thing kind of died out, and it was basically the GPL license version 3 seems to have been what killed it. So a lot of this stuff is basically about licensing, right? That like the free software movement it tended to use this license called the GNU Public License, shortened to GPL, and that license has a particular trick to it where it's basically contagious. That if I release some software to you under the GPL and you use it, that's fine. If you ever make a modification to it that is useful, you have to also publish your modification. So there's a contagion. You can't just like take a lump of code and modify it for private use. You have to actually publish it again, which is pretty sweet. But the GPL version 2 had quite a few holes in it. Some things that were hard to anticipate, like some of them only became obvious with later use. There was an attempt to rectify this with GPL version 3, which tied up a lot of the holes. But then a lot of the big projects that were free software projects, such as Linux, the GNU tools, and the GNU C compiler and so on, they didn't adopt version 3. They were like, no, fuck that, we're sticking with version 2.
Is that right? Because Linux definitely did not adopt version 3, but I think the GNU tools did adopt version 3. And this is what caused the growth of open source, right?
Yeah, so there's a kind of interesting thing there where like the example that's used here is Apple, right? That like, because like on Mac OS they've shipped Bash and these sorts of programs for quite a while. But anyone who's used a Mac for development will probably have run across this problem where the version of Bash that's on there hasn't been updated in about 15 years. And it's because of the GPL version 3. Where, like, so the GPL folks were like pushing for like, oh, we're basically going to go after them, right? Like we're gonna be more litigious about policing the enforcement of these licenses, and we're going to make the license more restrictive. But Apple and these kind of folks could just go, nah, we're just not gonna use it anymore, right? Because they could always do something else. And what Apple did was they poured money into at what was at the time an upstart compiler project called LLVM, which, you know, because they poured money into it, got to be probably, you know, quite a bit better than the GNU C compiler, and at least as good in all the metrics anyone cares about. But like nowadays, all of the stuff on a Mac is compiled with LLVM, and it doesn't touch GCC at all. And they've replaced the new default shell on the Mac is not Bash, it's ZSH, which is under a friendlier license. So this strategy didn't work, and it like one of the biggest users of the GPL stuff just didn't adopt it, and all of the other big users that were corporate users, they just routed around it because of course they would. Like how would you expect it to turn out differently, you know?
Right, because the GPL as a political movement, or free software as a political movement, and GPL as its instantiation, is a movement for coders' political rights, and it kind of relies on the solidarity of software engineers in defending their rights, right? Like if they want to, you know, leaving aside the fact that the only way to enforce GPL is actually to go through the courts, and then so that involves the legal system, which is like, well, you need lawyers, you need money. Turns out these tech companies are actually way better endowed in those ways. But it.
Like that fucking scene in The Simpsons where like Mr. Burns just has this like closet full of fucking lawyers or whatever, and he just pushes a button and they all come out, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. And the other thing is, like, coders did not line up in solidarity with the GPL3. You know, they were like, no, actually, I'd like to have a job, and these firms that are promoting open source will hire me, and I will actually be able to live. So this idea of basically like coders going on strike to protect their political rights via the GPL3 did not work.
Wait. Are you telling me that like a strike wave that doesn't have mass support and doesn't have the sustained support of the majority of workers in that sector won't become like a general strike and won't actually challenge power? Jeez, I wonder if there's anyone that could have told anyone about all that kind of shit before any of this. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is it was never framed as a labor issue in this way.
Which is a huge problem, because it so clearly is. Like, looking back on all this is all labor and production stuff, folks, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like, it was always framed as, in a very, like, liberal, individualist standpoint. Like, oh, as an individual hacker, I deserve these rights, and they are, like...
It's like guild stuff, right? It's like...
Yeah, it's exactly guild stuff. It's like they are protections of my artisanal rights as an individual. And, like, kind of like our rights as a guild, as an aggregate. But it didn't even, like, amount to, like, craft union consciousness.
No, didn't even hit that fucking bar, yeah.
Like, it was like the idea of the collective was much more nebulous, and it was kind of like it's the sort of thing, the sort of collectivity that is referred to when people in Silicon Valley or elsewhere refer to quote unquote technical people. Like, oh, we are technical people. We're not normies, right?
But it's highly individualized, right? Like, and even the ways in which it did sort of touch on labor stuff was very individual. It was like, because like a fairly common refrain was like, oh, as an individual techie, I prefer to work at companies that use open source software and say open source languages and so on, because I want to preserve, like, I want to develop skills that will still be useful outside that company. So, like, this is why so many techies would really balk at the thought of going to work for a company that either used a proprietary language or like a weird closed source database or something, because then their skills wouldn't actually be transferable. They wouldn't be useful for another job. And it's kind of like, it's why like this sort of Microsoft stack, the like Windows and .NET stuff kind of generally lost out in the cloud computing realm, because people wanted to use Python and shit because it would be useful to them later. Like, you know, once you leave the... Because, like, this... I guess it's also that, like, labor thing of, like, going from maybe an earlier sort of, like, late 20th century era where you had probably, you know, something closer to job for life sort of stuff. You know, if you started working for IBM at a certain point, it was pretty much guaranteed that they'd bury you at some point quite a bit later. But then you go into the new era, and it's like, nah, you're kind of doing fairly, you know, precarious gigs for maybe a couple of years at a time, and you're either getting fucking liquidated or the gig goes nowhere and you kind of need to move. But like this, it's a very different way of working. And so,
yeah, it was framed about sort of like quote unquote human capital development.
Yes, absolutely. Which is very like it's like, in retrospect, what that actually added up to. Like that was the motivation for a lot of the techies involved, right? Like, and fuck it was my motivation. You know, it's like, you know, I don't want to work on some dumb closed fucking ecosystem. I want to work on something that could get me the next job, right? But what that really amounts to is a commons of capital. Like it's a capitalist commons that's being cultivated. It's the various capitals involved, like the various firms, lowering their own costs by externalizing all this stuff so that they don't have to train engineers in whatever weirdo language they use. They just get a Python guy. Training's already done. You don't have to fucking do anything.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about open source. This section opens up here with the mission of the open source initiative, which is open source enables a development method for software that harnesses the power of distributed peer review and transparency of process. The promise of open source is higher quality, better reliability, greater flexibility, lower cost, and an end to predatory vendor lock-in.
That fucking voice.
Says this is so profoundly different from the free software definition that it's almost comical. Where free software says we value freedom, which we define in these ways, open source says your code will get better. The free software movement was prepared to start fights with corporations that used their work but didn't play by their rules. The open source movement was invented to be a friendly, apolitical, pro-corporate alternative to the free software movement. And the contrast between use free software because it preserves your freedom and use open source software because it's better is profound and honestly a little disappointing to revisit this explicitly. So, and this is something I heard a lot from coders is like, when they would argue for the use of open source over free software is I'm interested in the quality of the code. Like I'm interested in producing the best product that I possibly can, and open source is what's going to let that happen. And this kind of like pride in the quality of the work, like that's not toxic. Like it's good to be proud of what you make. But this kind of like artisan ethos of like, well, I don't care about labor issues, but I do care about the quality of the product is really playing into the capitalist hands.
Absolutely. It's like that guy from Eliza, right? The fucking, the Oracle.
Oh yeah.
Guy,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Doesn't want to put up with these snowflakes, just want to get the job done. We're down there in the trenches, that sort of thing. I think the point, it really is remarkable going right back to that in the mission of the open source initiative, right? Because like the things that jump out at me now are the power of peer review, distributed peer review, and transparency of process. It's very like what capital does with academia, right? Like it's kind of like harvesting. Like maybe it's one of these four cheaps, right? It's harvesting these kind of raw materials that are worked up by a distributed social process. And a lot of this is like various capitals like not externalizing, but like sharing their costs of development. Like it's reducing duplication of work. Because actually no, fuck it. This is all coming back to me now. Like it's been so explicit all along that it's almost hard to kind of look back on it all. But like I used to work at a place, it was one of my first programming jobs actually, it was like a Windows.NET sort of fucking shop or whatever, and like it was a lot of that kind of horrible stuff. And one of the things I noticed with like a lot of those small, like that the city I was in had this like cluster of these like small .NET shops, right? Like they were all like maybe 20 people at the most. They were all doing all this like bespoke development for like oil companies and stuff. But what was kind of interesting about that was that they all seemed to have reinvented their own web stack internally. There was it was obvious duplication of effort, and like as is typical for these sorts of things, as like a side hobby, I was getting into like Python and Ruby and Rails and all this kind of stuff. And what was obvious about that open source ecosystem was that it was really cutting down on duplication of effort. That there was no point in reinventing your own web stack in 10 or 15 different places. You should just all use the same one that's developed in common. And like, yeah, that's just capital having its own commons. That's what that fucking is. How did I not see it?
Well, the end of this section here says it well. Where free software is misguided and quixotic, open source is spineless and centrist. And, as tends to happen with spineless centrism, it has eaten the world.
Oh, Jesus. It's Blairism in fucking binary form. It's awesome.
So, starts the next section of winning. If there's anything corporations love more than rewriting software so it lets them make all the money they can dream of, it's letting other people do that work for them. It took a while to take off because the conservative approach of keep things closed source was pretty solidly entrenched in a lot of places. This is like the Ballmer, what did he say? Linux is communism or some nonsense?
I think he said like open source is a cancer or Linux is a cancer or something.
Open source is a cancer. That's right. Yeah.
Is Ballmer dead now? Probably not.
I don't think so. I think he's like a sports team owner, right? This ethos was pretty solidly entrenched in a lot of places, but now even the once conservative holdouts have accepted the gospel of centrism. Corporations have little to nothing to lose by publishing existing source code and can gain all sorts of unpaid volunteer labor. And, on top of that, what you were describing, Shane, which is the quote, the volunteer labor of other corporations paying into the commons, essentially, right? There's synergies there. If they start a new internal project, important enough that they're prepared to put effort into it, but not so important that someone could run off with it and compete with them, then now they'll likely open source it. Worst case scenario, they do all the work they were already prepared to do. Best case scenario, their library turns into the single most popular library of its type, with thousands of unpaid volunteers donating their time to you. More labor for free, community goodwill for having started the project everybody uses. The benefits, if it goes well, are countless. Free software is not, in principle, anti-corporate, but corporations are very cautious getting caught up in the free software movement because that actually creates obligations for them. Open source gives corporations a shot at improving their code for free, so long as they don't share so much someone could start a competitor. So there's zero reason for a corporation to not get into open source. And again, as it mentions, there were many corporations that, despite this obvious logic, refused to go open source. And so there was a kind of heroic period of open source, which was fighting, shop by shop for open source freedoms.
Street by street,
Yeah, really, it was people in engineers inside these firms that would argue on a personal basis for the use of open source and try to introduce it wherever they could, right? Ultimately this was a self-defeating effort, but as you were saying, Shane, there was a logic to it at the individual level in terms of being able to develop personal skills that would be transferable to other jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's really sinking in for me how much even this was based in precarity, right? That because software engineers are usually pretty damn well paid, but since the .com crash, it's still been a pretty precarious sort of industry as well, right? And you can see that anxiety shining through with these kinds of individual motivations to keep yourself on your toes and stuff. You got to always be keeping up with stuff, which then feeds back into this thing of as noted in the article that if a company like Facebook publishes one of its big projects like React, the web rendering library for JavaScript, worst case, it fucking goes nowhere. Who gives a shit, right? They can still use it internally. Best case scenario, which is actually what happened, is it becomes the way to do rendering, right, in JavaScript. And now you've got basically every single new developer, everyone who's fucking sick of slumming it out at Starbucks and wants to teach themselves how to code, every goddamn one of them is learning that library. And that means that, Facebook's hiring pipeline is easy because everyone knows the fucking internal tools already. They don't have to train anyone. And it also means that everyone's desperate to please them out the gate. everyone's desperate to be like, oh no, yeah, sure, I'll learn all this shit on my own time. I'll rise and grind every day of the week if it means getting a sweet crumb, you know?
Yeah. So they go on to say the best part for corporations is they don't even have to be the ones to start a project. If you're just some random small-time developer, they can just show up. You made a cool database server that's under an open source license. Amazon's selling it as a service now, and they're not paying you a fucking dime. You want to change your license to stop them from doing that? Now the open source people are yelling at you, because when they say they're apolitical, they mean they support the status quo. And the free software people are also yelling at you because you didn't do it their way with their license. You did it a different way with a different license. And that goes against Amazon's freedom to screw you over.
Oh yeah, this one really resonates, because this has been a slap fight in the last year with I think it's specifically, like, is it Redis, or was it one of these other like big, like hugely successful open source database things where they had to kind of relicense it to forbid like selling the hosting, basically, because like this is exactly what happens, is that Amazon comes along and goes, okay, we can slap this thing on a server and charge you fucking $20 a gigabyte to stick your data into it, and like the original author won't get a damn thing. But then this later part of the paragraph also happened where they were kind of fucked regardless, because like if you try to relicense to prevent that from happening, somebody gets mad at you, and if you do the other thing, somebody gets mad at you as well. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. It's an unproductive political system, except for Amazon, except for the people who profit. So that gives one example. GitHub itself is arguably the epitome of the open source movement. The platform itself is closed source because they don't want people to compete with them running their code. And also they sell the very expensive self-hosted version to corporations. Opening up the source for GitHub itself would take a chunk out of GitHub's profits. Can't have that. But they don't even need to start or adopt an open source component to profit off other people's labor. Literally every project on GitHub makes GitHub more valuable. Popular projects get people in. Network effects bring their colleagues in. And then when it's time for something that you'd rather have closed source, you and everyone else are already on GitHub, so you might as well spring for the paid tier. If they believed open source was in principle better, they'd be open source themselves. They believe open source is profitable for them, and corporate profit is by definition value generated by labor, but not paid to the laborer. This is that's a bit of a gloss. It's not technically a Marxist, a corrected Marxist political economy, but you get the point, right?
It's fine.
Oh fuck. Yeah, and then goes on to sort of mention that exactly what you were saying, Shane, like, what's good for corporations is, of course, bad for people. The individual contributors don't get paid, the main maintainers are sort of like under the control of corporations, like they're paid staff, right? And then the fact that the professional core maintainers are paid staff to work on the project actually raises the bar for independent maintainers, which like increases the pace of work and leads to burnout.
Yeah, right. Your own folks are able to keep up with it, but everyone else, right? They're going to be pushed to the margin by the accelerated pace. Another aspect of this that just kind of occurred to me was the way that you get, like, in the name of like open source collaboration, you get collaboration across capitals. So like the React core team at Facebook will talk to the Google Chrome rendering people to work out performance stuff and like, help them to optimize the internals of their engine, right? And vice versa. And similarly, they'll, have teams talk to people at whatever database company and stuff like that. And like, it's fucking strange, right? Like, there's just like, the term that keeps coming back again and again is capitalist commons. Like, it is a commons that is tended by workers in these firms. for the benefit of the capitals, right? Wild stuff, I think there's also like a kind of with the when this open source stuff interfaces with kind of more precarious labor and people who aren't like steadily employed at these massive companies, there's a kind of elite participation thing, right? That like you have to be comfortable enough to work for free on the weekends, or you have to be in a position where you can kind of farm for clout to get into the kind of inner circles of these projects and so on, which has its own. It definitely has its own kind of like elite artisanal sort of dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite exclusive, for sure. So article goes on to say quite well, the free software movement was on occasion writing actually good software. Corporations saw that and wanted to get in on it without actually having to have principles. So they embraced the nominal goals of the free software movement and extended it into a more corporate-friendly movement with a larger pile of software to draw from. The conventional step after embrace and extend is naturally extinguish. The free software movement died long ago, in no small part due to its own mistakes, so there's not much left to extinguish. That which is being extinguished, that which died with Mozilla, is the idea that the open source movement could have any other principles than corporate exploitation. I wouldn't say that the open source movement died per se. It was undead from the moment it began. It won, and with its victory, it has stopped pretending to be anything other than a lich. The only meaningful lesson to draw for the open source movement is that letting corporations do whatever the hell they want ends poorly, which is not exactly news.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah. What a downer. This is a fucking great article, actually. I don't know. Like looking back on, maybe it's like a lot. Some of the rest of the article is about, it's like this licensing and maybe what kind of options are there? Like what's on the table now for like attempts at fixing the stuff like in the post open source world, whatever. And there's a couple of attempts at like ethical stuff, and there's like a Hippocratic license and stuff like that. But it's all kind of like ultimately trying to trick corporations into binding their own hands. It doesn't seem to work. Plus, like all of this seems to be I think maybe at its core it's ultimately misguided, right? Trying to do like distributional licensing solutions to what is ultimately a production and labor problem. And looking back, and even looking forward, I'm kind of finding it hard to imagine what could work short of like challenging the capitalist system. I don't know.
Right. The question is like, can there be any form of this that is a challenge to the capitalist system? The GPL3 challenging capital was, in retrospect, suicidal. And that wasn't even a very direct challenge, I
think they have a line in here about like what they tried to do with that, like don't scare away the prey immediately by threatening them with more serious litigation and like weirder ways of enforcing things. Like there's references here to these like variants on the JSON license, which is it's a funny license because it's basically the MIT license but with an added line saying that the software shall be used for good, not evil. Which is fucking hilarious. But like IBM actually paid the author of the JSON standard for permission to do evil with the software. So there's these variations on like ethical enforcements for things, and like, oh, we'll decide when you're in violation, and it's like nobody's gonna fucking take it. They're just gonna do their own thing. Like nobody's gonna sign themselves up to be fucked like that. You're not gonna snare them if you scare them away before they even get to the trap.
Yeah, and this model of like pay to do evil is essentially the model of buying indulgences from the Catholic Church. The trouble is, coders are not the Catholic Church. They don't have that kind of power monopoly that where it's like, oh yeah, you're going to hell or you're going to get excommunicated if you don't buy these indulgences from us. So like it's, I don't know. I mean, socialists have done weird things in the past to try to get ahead, like robbing banks or running drugs. Selling indulgences to software companies, is no less strange than those things. I don't know how effective it'll be, but it's an idea.
There were also references here to basically using kind of patron licenses, where like the default sort of license is like, hey, look, it's free to use if you're not using it commercially, but if you are using it commercially, it's $10 a month or whatever. And it's kind of the Patreon model. I could imagine that maybe working out, and that would close the gap on, like it's the labor and production stuff, right? Like you kind of have to get fucking paid to do the stuff, and like attending a commons isn't, it can't be free. You have to feed yourself. So there has been like reassuring movement towards taking this more seriously, and thinking about, look, how do we really support and make this stuff sustainable? And like a patron model, some sort of like basically like subscription model seems to be a way to do it. That doesn't rely on the software being always like a project of a much larger company that can afford to put some people on the job and to tend to it. So, shrug. There's that.
Yeah. So there, for example, is the Prosperity license version of License Zero.
Yeah. See, you've got like dual licenses. It's like Parity and Prosperity, or whatever. And it's kind of like a private public license, whatever, where...
Parity license is essentially just open source, right? The Prosperity license allows any use as long as it is not commercial in nature. As such, it technically doesn't satisfy the open source definition and is thus, in a very concrete sense, a post-open source license. Their Patreon license, which I imagine is being changed because, they can't use the name of Patreon in their license, which isn't linked on their homepage at all, grants an automatic license exception for certain financial supporters. Oh, I guess this is like the license being used on Patreon. Yeah, so... another idea is to rely on norms instead of licenses. So they say a license is a tool of the law, but the law is not actually very good at delineating the exact boundaries of ethical behavior in either direction. As such, the approach Louise Villa describes is to tell the law to mind its own damn business and use a maximally permissive license, and then use social norms to delineate what behavior you do and do not find acceptable. So this is kind of similar to like what has happened at the major tech firms with what we were talking about with like the techlash and like saying like, no, we're not going to code for ICE, right? Like those kind of corporate guild norms to try to police the use of code. Norms are tough to start from scratch, but sociologically they can fill a similar role in principle to laws while maintaining flexibility. I'm not sure what a normative approach to post-open source software would look like. I'm not aware of anyone attempting to implement it, and I'm not sure I'm ready to be the first. But it would most likely combine the WTFP, which is I believe that is the do whatever the fuck you want public license, or more plausibly, zero clause BSD. Zero clause BSD is the like maximally permissive license, right?
Mm-hmm. It's basically a non-license, but like without actually being unlicensed.
Yeah, it's like it's not just relying on your naturally given copyright with no license whatsoever. So you can't actually like let other people use it without them getting your explicit permission. With an ecosystem of standard sets of norms similar to the current varieties and codes of conduct. So yeah, again, basically like craft unionism of a sort is the proposal there. Yeah, those are kind of the two things we come away with, right? Is like some kind of indulgences model, some kind of like Patreon dual license model, or a norm-based craft unionist model.
Yeah, I think that the latter ones seem... It's kind of hard to imagine how they would stand up without like significant labor organizing. Like you would have to get towards having craft union sort of levels of organizing. Because how do you enforce norms?
It kind of reminds me of what was that we covered previously? The that plan in Britain.
The Lucas Plan?
Yeah, the Lucas Plan, which was kind of that kind of like craft unionist thing. Like, we're not going to make weapons to kill fellow workers, right? Like this like as a group, we are deciding this is a norm and we will not cross it. And that requires group corporate organization. When I say corporate, I don't mean corporations. I mean as like a guild or as a union of some kind.
Collective body, yeah.
Yeah, a collective body.
Yeah. And the former of the kind of solutions as well, I think seems plausible for like smaller, like single maintainers, whatever. And like notably GitHub has introduced a sort of like sponsorship feature for profiles. So if you're the author of a, fairly popular repository on there, people can chuck you, like it's a sort of micro Patreon. It's like a stripped down Patreon feature built into GitHub. So I think maybe there's a recognition even amongst the capitalists that like maybe they're pushing it a bit far with the like difficulty of keeping maintainers alive. Like what was that thing in like England where the sort of bourgeoisie realized that like suddenly the proletariat were dying faster than they were being born. And they were like, oh shit, we better ease off on this stuff because we're going to be in big fucking trouble if everyone dies.
That was the impetus behind coming up with the poor laws, right?
Yeah, something like that. But like one of these inflection points where maybe the bourgeoisie or whatever the capitals involved in this kind of realized they might have pushed it a bit far and like make some sort of concession or set up something that can like make it a little bit easier on the people they're exploiting, or make it easier to keep the cheapness cheap, to put it in those kind of more terms. Because if a bunch of maintainers burn out and fucking disappear, that shit's going to get expensive very fucking quickly. Like we saw with the various bugs in the SSL libraries, that like it turned out those were being maintained by one or two people. And suddenly everyone was shitting themselves going, oh no, fuck, hold on. We gotta finally maybe start paying this guy to do the things. Because if we don't, the internet stops working.
Yeah, it's a world scale piece of infrastructure that's being maintained by some guy who is being criminally underpaid. I guess what this says is like, we've kind of talked in the past about industrial unionism in tech, and I could see a norms-based approach figuring into that quite heavily because it sort of already has in a way. But maybe that needs to be a more conscious articulation. And then at the individual level, I mean, I guess you can at least probably extract some rents from capital, who are themselves pretty much, like in the tech sphere, rentiers. Like, you can get rent from the renters, from the rentiers, by doing some kind of Patreon deal. So I think that the former maybe has more legs as a organizing strategy against capitalism, whereas the sort of like, I'm going to do a Patreon is the keep yourself alive dimension of this.
And like, as someone who's put a fair bit of effort over the years into kind of personal open source projects and like making very occasional contributions to kind of other people's projects, I now find it hard to imagine that I would do something similar again, of like just being like, oh, here's this thing I spent quite a bit of time on, I'm throwing it over the wall with no strings attached. I think at a minimum I would, put a Patreon thing on for some of them. Probably have no way to ever enforce it, but whatever. And, I think I still get bitten by that occasional itch to like do a little bit of hobby coding, but I think I would now be more inclined to, contribute to something like Emacs, the editor, like the core of that, to like help with its maintenance rather than, anything that would be like just, oh, here's a thing I wrote that's actually quite useful, and I'm throwing it over the walls that anyone can, including any fucking company, can just use it to make their lives easier. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, Emacs is still serving capital, right? Like, that is being used by coders in capitalist firms to do their work.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of like a matter of personal aesthetic preference. Like, this is a tool that I use and respect, and therefore I would like to contribute to it.
Yeah, maybe it just says a lot about the degree of disillusionment, right? Like, because I do feel very disillusioned with all this kind of stuff now, and maybe having spent the last 3 years reading a lot of Marxist material in depth has contributed to that disillusionment quite a bit. But like, even at the level of like being someone who enjoys, like, I enjoy programming, like it's a fun little thing to do. I kind of sort of like the work as well sometimes. There are certainly moments of joy in it. But that disillusionment is pretty deep at this point as well, of like, yeah, geez, like I just, the thought of slugging it out on yet another open source library, whatever, just to have it kind of like get hoovered into the machine of capital and used for whatever purposes they want to do is harder to really stomach. Whereas, and the only thing that I can imagine dedicating a lot of time to would be maintenance of Emacs or Vim or something like that, which would be it's still serving capital, but is maybe marginally more acceptable than the others.
Right. I mean, it's acceptable for kind of like aesthetic as opposed to strategic reasons. Okay, well, I'm going to read out the conclusion of this article because it's pretty good. So it says, FOSS is dead. Free software died long ago, and open source software was a lich the whole time, only now claiming victory and beginning to pull up the ladder behind it. What will come next? I can't predict every aspect of the post-open source movement, but I can tell you one thing. It'll absolutely require if it's going to be meaningful. What really killed Mozilla? What really killed free software? What really gave us the already dead open source movement? Optimizing for profit at the expense of any other consideration. Chasing short-term gains and ignoring long-term sustainability or justice. Squeezing every drop of surplus value out of every person within reach and putting it in the hands of a dozen investors and overpaid executives. In a word, capitalism. If post-open source wants to not die the same death, it will need to explicitly and aggressively fight its greatest existential threat. So, the point here is, if we want to have a political movement as a group of workers, right, as coders, or a political movement that is inspired by aesthetic ideals like you might see with, contributing to Emacs or Vim, we pretty much have to explicitly and aggressively fight capitalism because this is like something that Feinberg talks about a lot. Our aesthetic ideals are imperiled by the imperatives of capitalism. Even that thing that is quote unquote extra economic because capital doesn't care about it, is imperiled.
Because it imperils everything at one point or another.
Yeah. I mean, it imperils all life, literally.
Yeah. And this stuff is explicitly part of the technical code, right? Like to go back to Feenberg, right? It's even worse for that. It's not just basket weaving, which gets ruined because capital. It's like, well, this is basket weaving in capital. Like it's a coding is scripting of capital in some sort of way as well. So it's even more vulnerable to these problems. I like this conclusion. I feel like this is almost it's the end of a Scooby-Doo episode where they pull off the mask and it was the value form all along, you know?
Oh my god, yeah. It's every episode is the same. You know, there's got like a musical interlude where they're just like going around like problem after problem, and like every time they pull off the mask, it's the value farm. The value farm again.
Would have gotten away with it too, huh?
Yeah. And I would have gotten away with it. If it weren't for you stinking communists.
Exactly. Oh fuck. What does it say that no matter how many times they unmask the value form, it's back in the next episode? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that. Like, I feel like it's kind of like what it's like to be a liberal sociologist or something. Like, you just go and like unmask it, and you're like, well, yeah, but I want like an isolated problem I can deal with. You know, on to the next one. Oh, the value form again. Oh no. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see the sort of remnants of, or some break off from the FOSS thing, try to reconstitute a sort of post-open source that's either some sort of like labor activism based, or at the very least trying to get some kind of compensation for the work performed. But yeah, wow, what an end of an era. This is remarkable, really remarkable time. And all that sort of crazy Silicon Valley optimism being laundered through Mozilla and just kind of going nowhere. Fucking crazy.
You know, Mozilla is dead. The Bay Area is on fire. No one could breathe.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's happening too.
You know,
fucking hell.
People are fleeing Silicon Valley, but then getting paid cut rates because they're not living in Silicon Valley. Because like capital's like, well, I've got to pay the cost of your reproduction. I'm obviously not going to pay you the entirety of the value of your product. So it's dire. Situation, to say the least. You know, people are saying now that like, oh yeah, just like apocalyptic hellfires are just going to be an annual occurrence in California for the foreseeable future, and in retrospect, 2020's hellfires around the Golden Gate Bridge are going to seem quaint. Is what people are saying.
Yeah. Wow.
So, you know, Silicon Valley literally burning to the ground around us, and its ideals are dead and become nothing more than the possession of a lich. So,
rip in peace, Silicon Valley.
We may need to reorient our efforts, comrades.
We do, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun to see that unfold. And I do hope it takes the form of proper organizing and realizing this is all labor and production stuff. There's nothing special about this computer stuff. It's good old fashioned alienated labor.
Yeah, I mean it's good and well to have aesthetic investment in your particular form of work, but you need to. I mean, I think it should be obvious that form of work is not, in fact, different in kind from others because it's still socially necessary labor time that you're putting in, right? The use value of it is distinct, but the exchange value is commensurable with any other exchange value because it is a commodity, and that's what capitalism's all about, you know? It doesn't respect the particularity of your labor.
No, totally. But like so much of that has been laundered through basically sci-fi shit, more or less. Like that, like because computers are sci-fi, like it seemed to a couple of generations of programmers end to end as if it was different somehow. It's like, oh no, this is the shit they do on Star Trek. I'm different. I'm cool.
Well, yeah, and also it was like it was a form of labor that had that afforded a premium price. You could sell your labor for a premium. So, you know, because of the use values involved, right? For a while, until eventually capital smooths out the kinks in the process, and then you're just another worker.
Yeah, like the process described in Marx and Nature, right? Like with the sort of capital settling in place and intensifying, and then spreading and to settle down somewhere else and intensifying. It's like once it burns through one region, it'll just fucking move somewhere else. Like so, like yeah, I mean, so like for the folks in Silicon Valley who get to go remote, right? They get to move somewhere else. It's like, okay, cool, you know, you get to live somewhere a bit cheaper, but then your wage is going to get cut. Okay. And now you're up against every motherfucker in the whole continent, like for the same work. It's geez, you can't win. You can't win against capital without actually challenging it. You know.
Yeah. What is it gonna like? You know, what is the corporate struggle, the guild struggle of coders against technical visas gonna do when remote working is the norm? Right. What the fuck good is that gonna do you?
Some big transformations coming. In that whole
and I don't say this to gloat because, you know, I work in education and Google just started a program that they say they will recognize as equivalent to a university degree. So basically the writing's on the wall for higher ed. Like, you know, it's like the veil of sort of like the peculiarity and the prestige of the university is getting torn off, and the corporatized university is just going to be supplanted by a corporation. You know, it's just going to be purely corporate education in even a way that all the pretenses of higher ed will not be present in.
And the research stuff will be replaced by all the sort of like open research stuff, right? Like where they're just like this is already a thing that's kind of going where like you have these like movements to basically create a similar ethos to open source in sciences and like any kind of thing that does depend on research, and that's just going to get transplanted into whatever private research institutes are there.
Right, and I mean the universities are going to continue to do research because they get funding from the state. Right? Like, obviously, capital's still going to take advantage of state funding, but the thing they've been doing of higher education is just, it's going to be a shadow of what it was, you know?
Indeed. Fuck.
Does not bode well for folks like myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's looking grim. It's looking much more precarious these days than it did a while ago, you know. Definitely feeling that the general slide towards precarity. And it's like, yeah, we've got a pretty, you know, as a programmer, got a fairly comfortable sort of position for the moment, but more and more becoming obvious that it's very much for the moment. And those days are numbered, it seems. Ah, fuck. Downer ending. I love it.
Well, I mean, you know, the point that I've brought up previously about coders occupying a place in communication networks that is potentially powerful to turn against capital is still true, but the organizing has to happen to actually turn that into a weapon against capital, because, you know, time's up on we're going to build a craft union and then improve our working conditions. Like, that is a thing that we need to think about working conditions as being relevant. They're never going to not be relevant. But, I mean, it is, like, literally the end of the fucking world out here. Mm-hmm. Like, like, we don't have any time to do capitalist solutions or capitalist accommodations. We've got to make something happen. Because, like it's all going down.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
This is 2020, folks. We do live in the end times.
Spending 20 years trying to fucking trick corporations into doing the right thing through a license, it seems fucking comical. Like, really, truly comical in retrospect. Oh, fuck. What a world. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the author says it here. First the free software was the tragedy, and then open source was the farce.
In reference to some German guy you might have heard of.
Yeah, some smart German guy.
Yeah, it's the sort of fucking tragedy of a lot of this is that, like, oh hey, this shit about, like, labor and production and capital and all that sort of stuff. Wonder if there might have been something we could have just looked up before, and read about to maybe prime the pump to understand some of this stuff. It's almost as if this might have been covered somewhere else previously. Maybe tech isn't unique. Maybe computer science isn't fucking special. Maybe it is still under the umbrella of human endeavor, and therefore all of these quote humanities studies, all these fucking snowflakes, maybe they have something to say about it all.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the persistent delusion for the stock trader or the capitalist is this time it's different, right? The Dow really is going to hit whatever it is, 10 billion this time, or we really have decoupled, right? Like the decoupling shit is already in the discourse right now. When people talk about trading, they're like, oh yeah, it's just Amazon's making infinite money while people are fucking starving on the street and committing suicide at record rates. And Silicon Valley itself is on fire, and the Pacific Northwest is choked in a death fog. Like, it's fine because decoupling, right? Like that is just like inherent to the stock market, and it's like a thing Marx talks about in Volume 3. It's never stopped being true. That delusion will arise, and in labor markets, it's the same sort of delusion. But what you get is that, oh no, my industry is different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're special, yeah.
I'm a technical person. I'm not a sheeple, and therefore I'm a libertarian, right?
It's a sociocognitive aneurysm, just fucking completely decouples sense from motor. It just allows it to all spin freely.
Yeah, but it is capital engages in a lot of short-term thinking, and that leads it to disastrous ends. But as individuals, we also have a predilection to short-term thinking when the gains are very obvious. And I think that's what we can see in the history of the work of software engineers, right? As a group, is, well, it's easy to believe you're different when you're making bank and you're doing this, high-minded aesthetic work on the information frontier, whereas your family members back home are struggling to survive, making minimum wage and dealing with social collapse, right? Like, it's it's easy to fall into that fallacy when there are things that strongly encourage it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely recognized it even in myself, like, years ago. It's just like, and looking back, it's like, holy shit, like, how, yeah, it's, one asks the question of, like, how does one ever believe that kind of shit? But yeah, there's completely explicable, explanations for why one would start to believe that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like, no, folks, we're not special. There's nothing fucking unique about this stuff. It's labor, it's society, it's fucking politics, as it always has been. And there's nothing unusual about this. It's the good old fashioned struggle. But maybe, well, the new situation is that the clock is ticking faster than ever, and it's very, very close to midnight. So
yeah, maybe we need like a climate doomsday clock, where it's just like, 1 second to midnight.
I think it'd be like, I don't know, it'd be some sort of weird Xenos clock where it's like perpetually hovering both between and on top of midnight.
It asymptotically reaches oblivion.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh Christ. I guess it's a decent segue into the our kind of we'll do a sort of short state of the unit address kind of, because it's been a hell of a year. It's been fucking crazy. And I'm feeling tired, pretty fucking tired.
We still got 3 months to go, baby.
Hard to imagine that
2020.
It's hard to imagine that there will be 3 more months.
Yeah. I believe someone I was listening to yesterday said it well, that time moves strangely in Lordran.
Mm-hmm. It does, right? Absolutely. It's been fucking wild. I think I think we've both been kind of feeling the burnout a little bit. Not so much for the show specifically or anything like that, but like just life stuff and like pandemic stuff. Like it's earlier in the pandemic, like in March, was weirdly easier than this last month or two has been just like depletion, I've found, at least. Because all the reserves are kind of worn down. It's like, wow, fucking hell. And geez, I think this week we're going to get new lockdowns probably in Britain.
Yeah,
so
in the UK, right?
Cool and good, It's going to be fucking amazing.
Cool. Good.
So, I don't know, like, I definitely, like, for the listeners, I absolutely appreciate the support over this has been a good year for the community. We've had a great time with the Brain of the Firm reading group. It's been a really strong year for the show. And I think we've probably put out some of our better content as well. We've had some really fucking great times on these episodes. But I think, it'll be a couple of weeks before this thing actually comes out. But we're going to take a bit of a break from recording for a month or two and reconstitute ourselves. And I think that the Brain of the Firm reading groups will trickle out. So there'll be content, but might be a tiny slowdown in production stuff. And I think we may have some tantalizing hints of possible interviews to come, but we're looking to do a slightly longer mini-series project when we get back, as a bit of a palate cleanser, and to dedicate some time to something that we think is really worth examining. We're going to be playing a game called Kentucky Route Zero, which is possibly my favorite ever piece of media, like ever of any format by a long stretch. It's fucking remarkable. It's a narrative game. It's a clicky talkie, perhaps. It's beautiful. It's really lovely to look at. The music, the composition of the whole thing is amazing, and it has a lot to say about labor and life and precarity. And we're going to spend probably 5 episodes on it, because it's an episodic game that was released in 5 episodes over the course of 8 years, maybe. I think the final part came out this year, or no, the final part came out last year. Last November, maybe?
Time moves strangely in Lordran.
Time moves strangely on the zero. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, baby.
Time doesn't move strangely on the zero at all, because that game takes place over the course of one night and one day, doesn't it? The whole thing. So it took them 8 years to get through a night and a day in game time.
Yeah, it's so regardless, like it is recent that it was completed.
And it is astonishing. I keep thinking about it all the fucking time. It is amazing stuff.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's my favorite piece of media ever, but it is tremendously good. And as someone who's doing doctoral research into utopias in games, it's really one of the standouts. It really is. And so I am excited to revisit it. I think it is tremendous. I played some very good games this year, but I think it is the best game I've played this year. Even I would rank it even above Outer Wilds, which is another very, very good game.
It's oh boy, it's truly amazing. So we're giving you a bit of a heads up on this, because if you want to play it, I kind of would recommend having a go at it before we get to those episodes, because it's a narrative game that involves the player a lot in selecting dialogue and selecting backstories for the characters. There's a lot of like player involvement in the things. So there's no like puzzling or platforming challenges or any of that kind of stuff, but you are very much drawn into it, and it'd kind of be a shame to go through it having been spoiled on some of the stuff. Basically, I think it is one of the few things I would actually kind of strongly recommend going in fresh and just enjoying it yourself without knowing very much about it, and then coming out the other side to hear us talk about it. So by the time you hear this, you're going to have months conservatively to get that down. And also, like, I don't know, how long is it? It's like maybe 8 hours, 9 hours.
Yeah, I would say 8 to 10. Because the interstitials between the chapters are actually quite substantial. It took me, I believe, 3 evenings to get through.
Okay, that sounds about right. It took me, I don't know, 5 or 6 evenings spread over 8 years to get through. But I did replay it all in a oneer when the final episode came out. So that would have been a couple of evenings.
I played the first episode when it came out at first, and then I waited, and so I did a front to back, just like 3 nights in a row.
I like a fool played it immediately, like the first episode when it came out, and then like with bated breath I waited for every fucking episode. And I would like check the website religiously, like at least once a month I would go there and be disappointed that there wasn't a new episode out. I was waiting a long time for that.
Yeah, but certainly would recommend that people go front to back through it as densely as possible, because it is, as you said, like a night to morning story, and it is very emotionally intense, and I think you get the full impact going front to back in a short period of time, because you're really taken on a journey with these characters through the depths of post-industrial capitalism and out the other end.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe one tiny hint for listeners who intend to play this as well is that I think the first 2 episodes can be completed in one sitting each. They're pretty tasty little nuggets. They're not terribly long. Episodes 3 and 4 are quite a bit longer, and I think my first time playing through those, I tried to do them in one sitting each, and it's a bit of a rush, and you'll end up getting a bit annoyed. Well, I found myself getting a bit annoyed at the length, which is the wrong way to experience that material. So when it comes to 3 and 4, maybe split them up into 2 sittings each, and then do the 5th episode in one sitting, because it's relatively short. But you know, wow, what a fucking game. So I'm really looking forward to spending a bit of time camping out on that while we like sort of reconstitute ourselves for next year's kind of seasons, and plan out what we're gonna read. But you know, it's going to be a little bit of a change of pace. I hope it'll be an enjoyable change of pace. I think we as people could do with a change of pace after Hell Year, which is almost certainly going to get more hellish. But
yeah, I mean, the calendar is real, but I don't expect a change in 2021. It's just, you know, every year since I think like 2016 has just been people like, oh, 2016, oh, 2017, oh, 2018, oh, 2019, oh, 2020. But it's still useful to maintain a semblance of schedule and chronological meaning to your life, even if we are unstuck in time.
Yeah. Pretend that there's an anchor, you know, at least.
Yeah, like finding anchors for yourself. Like for myself, I'm ramping up my doctoral work right now, and that means taking a different tack with GIU, not to stop work, but to just move into a different mode. And sometimes just being able to move into a different mode is a luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a change. What's that? That's strange. Like a change is as good as a rest or something. Yeah, I guess like probably just to reassure like listeners, like this remains an incredible project for us.
Oh yeah, like this is absolutely core in importance to me. When I say moving into a different mode, I don't mean downgrading. I just mean, well, we're gonna do a relatively short game and cover it in exhaustive detail instead of a very long book that we summarize. You know.
Yeah, the payoff for some of those books is kind of pretty poor in terms of minutes of recording, but and also like I mean I think we kind of need to rest for a month or two as well, and we would rather slow things down than stop, right? That's the general reassurance here, is that we don't intend to stop the show at all. We're just probably going to need to go a little bit easier on ourselves in the back half of the year because it's winter as well, and we're sad people, you know. So winter is going to be hard.
Yeah, we live in the far northern hemisphere, and winter is a grind at the best of times. And you know, these ain't the best of times.
Winter in Hell World is even worse. Yeah, there was a point a couple of weeks ago where I was just walking along. I was like, oh, I feel like shit suddenly. It's like, oh, the weather has changed. It's just like that almost imperceptible turn in the air, and it's like, ah. Now it's time for sadness.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna try to look after ourselves and prepare some excellent content. And you know the reading groups they're fucking excellent. We're getting towards the end of Brain of the Firm. Those episodes those sessions being released on the feed will trickle out for quite a while now. So you'll never be short of our voices.
Yeah, I expect we'll finish the reading group readings, like the actual activity, by the end of the year, but the episodes are probably going to be coming into next year.
And, you know, we'll try to keep those as a fairly regular feature as well. We'll obviously take a break after that series is finished, but we'll plan something else as well. We've got plans for great content. It's just we kind of need to rest as well, and we encourage everyone to take the time they need to rest also, because yeah, we're in it for the fucking long haul with this stuff. Like there doesn't seem to be anything reassuring on the horizon, and it just means that we're going to have to be organized. We're going to have to be kind of in it for the marathon when it comes to organizing, right? And you know, really build ourselves up, build our communities up, build that muscle up, and stick to it for the long haul, which necessitates taking care of yourself, and also, you know, take care of yourselves in terms of like not just fucking doom scrolling on Twitter and stuff. It's like, you know, if that's probably the best thing I've ever done for myself, is delete fucking Twitter off my phone and like not check it very often. You know, you're gonna have a hard time if you're sinking into that kind of stuff too regularly. So you know, try to stay healthy, folks. Try to stay good. Oh fuck, what else? Read out Twitter, etc., Facebook, Patreon. Go there. Give us a couple of bucks. Get on the Discord. It's really good stuff. And check out the Emancipation Network. Our other shows. I think Mortal Science are ramping up to release another episode soon, which will be fucking great. That's turned out to be a really great show. I need to like re-download all of the episodes and listen to them back to back again to redigest them. That's turned out to be a real sleeper hit. There's some real fabulous stuff in that show.
Yes, and we are actually finishing the Brumaire reading series from Alpha to Omega. The last chapter is like considerably more substantial than I remembered it being. I think there's ways in which, like, the division between town and country, I think the first time I read the text didn't seem as important to me as they do now, you know, both with the way politics are going, but also having read, like, Marx in Nature, right, and the emphasis that book puts on the division between town and country. it's interesting to read Marx's comments on that in the final chapter of the Brumaire. Yeah, might take some time to finish, hopefully in the next month, but it's going on, and I'm sure Tom will edit it down to something digestible as opposed to our ramblings, which you get on the live stream.
Tom's quite good at the editing, isn't he? He's quite good.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks, listeners. It's wonderful as always, and we will be back relatively soon with some more tasty content. But in the meantime, do take care of yourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye bye. We'll catch you again soon.
Bye.